of the day. When you get an opportunity in this game, you make a play. The playmakers on three. 1, 2, 3.
Touchdown, Kansas City! The Chiefs are right in the thick of it, baby! It's getting closer, everyone. It's getting closer to Kansas City. It's the 2023 NFL Draft. And welcome to this episode of Defending the Kingdom. Mitch Holthus with you, voice of the Chiefs, along with senior team reporter Matt McMullen. And you can start, always this time of year, you start to feel the buzz in the building. But now you feel it throughout the city and the kingdom because the Chiefs, this year, not only Kansas City is the capital city of the kingdom, it's the capital city of the draft.
I just can't believe it's actually here.
It's so awesome.
Because I was at Union Station when we found out we were getting the draft in like 2018 or something, maybe 2019, I can't remember. But it seemed so far off, like that will happen here one day. And now it's in 2 weeks. It's just wild. And my route home, I drive through the city because I live on the Kansas side in Roland Park. I drive through the city on 35 and then south, and I drive right by Union Station, and I see all the stuff every single day. It's getting a little bit bigger. There was something like 200 semi-trucks that had to haul all the stuff here because it's going to be like the biggest stage ever for a draft, and it's here in Kansas City. It's amazing.
Yeah, the NFL is going all out even more than they've done in the past, and that's what's really interesting. And you can go to sportkc.org. That's, of course, the folks at the Greater Kansas City Sports Commission have worked so hard on this for years. But at their website, it gives you the artist's rendering of what it's going to look like. Plus, you can also, there's buttons there. You can get set up for one pass and everything else. But it just tells you, kind of gives you an idea, because we don't even know what it's going to feel like. The city doesn't know what it's going to feel like until you drop 250,000 people in here from all over the earth here for this 2023 NFL Draft. Okay, we're going to jump into the trenches in this episode. Next week, we got a really cool Defending the Kingdom ready for you. But this week, we're going to stay grinding on the draft. But before we do that and jump into the trenches, let's go around the world. Speaking of Kansas City being the capital city of the Chiefs' kingdom.
Yeah, so we've got 11 today for Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's down in Texas.
And his game against Cincinnati.
Yeah, there we go. And his game against Cincinnati, one of the heroes of the playoff run. But also he's down in Texas with a bunch of other guys training with Patrick Mahomes already.
So, you know, I was with Patrick a couple weeks ago in Tyler, Texas, and he was talking about that. He was like, you know, when do we start? And then there's the virtual. They do virtual OTAs, but he was already laying out. He was talking to me how he's going to lay out his own OTAs. We know that was where the run to Super Bowl 57 actually started.
Big time. It's just crazy how we were playing like a month and a half ago, and now they're training already, getting ready for next season. I can't wait. I'm ready. I hate this time when there's no football, but it's just wild how it never really ends if you win the Super Bowl and host a parade. But anyway, let's go around the world.
And then host the draft.
Yeah, it's a good life to have.
Yeah.
So we've got Michael in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. We've heard from Michael before. Todd is listening in Ukraine. So
wow.
Stay safe, Todd.
Yeah, please.
Richard is in Southern California. Caro and Mateusz are in Dortmund, Germany. And get this, they've booked their flight and their hotel. They're coming here for the season opener in September.
Well, wait a minute. We're going there.
I know.
So they're coming here.
They're coming here. There. Yeah, they can't wait.
For the season opener, which will be on a Thursday night, we know.
Yep. So they're asking if we have any ticket hookups to let them know.
Sure.
We'll work on that. Mark is in Massachusetts. He and his family will be here for the draft in a few weeks. We've got Sea-Dog in Oklahoma City. He calls it Chiefs Kingdom Heartland. Alan is in Queensland, Australia. Brian is in Kearney, Nebraska. I pronounced that correctly, right?
Kearney, yeah. It's not Kearney, it's Kearney. Home of the Bearcats, or the University of Nebraska Kearney Lopers.
There we go. Not far from Smith Center, right?
Not far. About an hour and 15 minutes.
All right.
Yeah.
Then we've got a listener in Boise, Idaho, a listener in Malta, Montana, and Anthony is in Marshfield, Missouri.
Marshfield, just outside of Springfield, which you know is a hotbed of the Chiefs' kingdom. Okay, we're going to dive in this edition of Defending the Kingdom into offensive and defensive lines, which is for offensive line, it's like the least sexy discussion when you talk about the draft. However, we also know what it has meant, especially the last 2 years, for the Chiefs' success. When you see a Creed Humphrey become the best center in the National Football League, a Trey Smith being one of the best value picks in the history of the Kansas City Chiefs in the draft, adding a Joe Thuney. But I'll say this. I've said this 200 times. I've said it on DTK. I'll say it some more. I'll say it 200 more times. Find me at any level. You could be the Smith Center high school team, or you could be the Kansas City Chiefs. Find me a good football team with a bad offensive line. Find one, because it'll be the first one.
Doesn't exist.
It's the last team. It's the last thing we look at in evaluating teams at all levels. It could be Blue Valley North and Blue Valley Northwest, and you're looking, but the last thing we look at is the offensive line, and after quarterback, it ought to be the next thing you look at.
This is where, like, as a football fan, I have grown over time because, like, as a teenager, you don't want to ever take an offensive lineman in the first round. You want, like, a wide receiver or a corner or a running back or something like a skill position player. But you're 100% right. Football's won in the trenches. And I think Chiefs fans know that, too, at this point, after what happened in Super Bowl 55. Mm-hmm. The more depth you can have at offensive line, whether that be in the interior or at tackle, the better, because it's a long football season. Guys are going to get hurt at some point, and when you can have guys step into a role and there's no drop-off and Patrick Mahomes is time to deliver the football, that's how you win games.
It was the first time Andy Reid made the playoffs as head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. And think about, Matt, what he had done with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was perennially in the playoffs with them, got all the way to a Super Bowl runner-up when he lost to the Patriots. But he told me that very first, getting ready for that game against the Colts in 2013, but he said, everything goes faster, it's quicker in the playoffs. We all know that, playoff speed. But he said, especially in the trenches. If it goes from regular season speed to playoff speed for everybody, it is double the speed and intensity in the trenches in the playoffs. And that was a lightning rod moment for me, especially in the postseason. And we've seen that come to life in the 2 Super Bowl championships of how the offensive linemen especially came together in those 2 runs.
And it seems like everybody has a really good pass rushing duo now. You just need a good offensive line in order to find success in this league offensively, because everyone has 2 or 3 really good pass rushers or a really great interior of the defensive line where they can create pressure and mess up what you want to do. And if you don't have good offensive linemen up front who can give your quarterback a chance, it's very difficult to win. And it sounds super cliche, but football truly is won in the trenches. And as we'll talk about, there's some solid tackle options at the back end of the first round or early in the second round in this draft that I think could help us on day one.
You may win your fantasy league with a wide receiver, but you'll have parades with offensive and defensive linemen. So let's jump into the defensive line. And you mentioned duos. Can I take you back to your youth?
Let's do it.
Because think about the Kansas City Chiefs and what Chris Jones did last year. He was arguably the best defensive lineman in the National Football League with what he did. We've kind of laid all that out in past episodes, and you saw it happen. But getting someone to be with him as a force on the defensive line, as a 1-2 punch, and with the other guys to rotate in, because Derek Nottie re-signed, and we see, coming back as Turk will come back too from his injury, Turk Wharton coming back from his ACL injury. But think about another mountain man in there. Let me take you back to your youth. You want to go there?
Yeah,
okay.
I can't wait.
I want to take you to the 2004-2005 Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay.
Now, the 04 Jaguars, I assert, ruined the Chiefs' season because the Chiefs only had to get a yard to pick up a first down, and they lose to Jacksonville 22-16 because of John Henderson and Marcus Stroud.
John Henderson.
John Henderson and Marcus Stroud. And this goes to Raccoon Mountain. We'll get to that in a second, too. John Henderson and Marcus Stroud were 2 skyscrapers that stood right in the middle of the defensive line. It kind of reminds me of the Kansas City Chiefs of the 69 Super Bowl IV champions when you went down the line of like, Buck Buchanan and Curly Culp and Jerry Mays and Aaron Brown, right? If the Chiefs can find someone of that ilk in this draft to stand side by side with Chris Jones and then have the rotational pieces come in, all of a sudden now you take the Kansas City Chiefs perhaps to another level and maybe a level and a half on the defensive side.
Yeah, because it opens up things for everybody, not just Chris Jones, but also George Karlaftis on the edge, Charles Omenihu on the edge or inside wherever he's playing. And if the Chiefs add an edge rusher in this draft, because there's really great depth at edge in this draft, we talked about the edge guys last week on DTK, opens up opportunities for them as well. Mike Dana, if you can have a force in the middle where the opposing offensive line has to worry about multiple guys, one of them being Chris Jones, just makes life a lot easier for a defense. And there's some guys in this draft, maybe not a superstar at 31, but some really good players who maybe could open up some opportunities for our guys.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up the nightmare Super Bowl 55 too. Just go back and watch that if you can bear it, because that defensive front for the Buccaneers, you think about Vita Vea, destroyed that game. He just destroyed that game.
He's the kind of player we're talking about here because people forget about him. They talk about Shaq Barrett, they talk about JPP, but Vita Vea was the key to all of that.
Did not play against the Chiefs that year in the regular season. He did in Super Bowl 55 and wrecked the party. All right, let's start with your first one. We'll go back and forth here. Your first interior defensive lineman that is intriguing or catches your eye.
How about Mazi Smith from Michigan?
Love Mazi Smith.
So Mazi Smith's a guy who would make sense at pick number 31 if the Chiefs wanted to go defensive tackle. Could also be an early day 2 pick maybe, depending on how the board falls, but really good player. He's 6'3", 323 pounds. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic does his annual freaks list. Do you ever look at that?
Yeah.
So he basically just outlines the freakiest players in college football. This was back in August. And Mazi Smith was number 1 on his freaks list because guys who are 323 pounds should not move like Mazi Smith does. PFF called him one of the strongest players in this draft class. Dane Brugler from The Athletic, one of the best draft analysts out there, used the words power and physicality when talking about him. He averaged nearly 50 snaps per game last year, so rarely came off the field. 0 penalties in 35 career games, and he's not a Chris Jones type where he's going to be bursting through the line and getting all these tackles for loss and sacking the quarterback. That's not really his game, but he could be a traditional nose tackle where he's just swallowing up the middle of the offensive line and opening up opportunities for everybody else. And he is such a problem on his own that the offensive line has to account for him. And also, he could be a very good player against the run. So Mazi Smith is my first guy.
Love it. Mazi Smith's tape is he just destroys it. You just described it perfectly, but he just wrecks like the A-gap and allows everybody else to wreak havoc, but he's so powerful. And people say, well, the Chiefs don't run a 3-4. Whoa. Sometimes they do, and sometimes you can have a true zero tech like him, but I think that's an excellent one. Another guy that's just interesting to study is Brian Brzee of the Clemson Tigers, a mountain man from a tall standpoint. He's 6'5.5", not as heavy. He's at 298. And what's interesting about him is most of the hype of when he came into Clemson. He was the number 1 recruit in the country in high school football that year. And he didn't really live up to that expectation at Clemson until maybe the end. Now, he's gone through a lot. If you look at him, you've got to maybe project the ceiling here.
Yeah.
Okay? Torn ACL in 2021, took out his season. Then he had shoulder surgery in 2022. It really affected Clemson's year. They weren't the same old Clemson Tigers. And then he had to deal with the tragedy of losing his 15-year-old sister, who had a really tragic, aggressive brain cancer, and he had to miss time because of that. But I know you've watched this video too. When he came back against Wake Forest, I think that was the first game back, he just took the game over.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'll eat you, and you. And you could see that he was playing with that kind of impetus behind him. But his presence now, also, if you're a Boston College fan, you don't want to look at it. I know you like Zay. This is your man Zay, but don't look at the quarterback getting destroyed by Brzee, in the end zone. So to me, he becomes that mountain man who could stand right beside Chris Jones when the opposing quarterback is coming up to the line of scrimmage and seeing 2 skyscrapers.
Yeah, I think if he didn't have the ACL and the personal tragedies and all of those things that really weren't in his control, I think it's realistic to think he could be like a top 15 pick in this draft. And when you're a team like the Chiefs picking at 31, if there's a guy whose talent tracks as a top 15 potential pick, but just because of things out of his control, the production wasn't always there and he's not going to be drafted that high, could be a great value pick for the Chiefs. Kind of reminds me of when the Eagles had Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. Like you have 2 just dudes along your defensive front. That's the kind of player Brzee is. So, I'd be all about it if he was there at 31. Another one for me, Keanu Benton from Wisconsin. Yeah, so he's 6'4", 309 pounds. Versatile player, has a ton of experience lining up and doing some different things on the interior over the A and B gap, bunch of snaps in both spots. Strong, violent hands are a couple of notes that you see from the draft analysts out there. He pairs that with a great jump off the line. So oftentimes, in one quick motion, in an instant, you'll see him swim over the guard or the center and be in the backfield. Just a really athletic player. Wisconsin runs a 3-4, so he was the nose in that, and that's kind of how he would translate probably to the NFL, even though the Chiefs are a 4-3 like you were explaining. He could be lined up right over the center or the A and B gap and just kind of wreak havoc up front in a similar manner to how I explained Mozzie Smith would. This is from Dane Brugler from The Athletic. Benton needs to play with consistent leverage and become a more consistent finisher for the NFL game, but his stout power base and above-average athleticism at his size are outstanding foundation traits. He has the talent to play all over the defensive line as a pro. Sounds like a Spags guy, doesn't he?
Yeah, when I saw him, I thought Spags guy because he's moved outside and inside, as you've said. Plus, he's grown. You see the ceiling with him. He was a suburban Milwaukee kid. So this guy wasn't, like from the southeast somewhere, and Wisconsin got him. So he's kind of grown within their program. But there's times, again, he can be dominant, and you get the pass rush with him, maybe even more than a Mozzie Smith, who will just like crush the pocket. You'll get an electric pass rush with him at times. So yeah, he's intriguing.
Quentin in our analytics department upstairs is a huge Wisconsin fan, just a gigantic Badger, and he's been harping on Keanu for weeks now. And I was like, I'm going to talk about him today. Like, do you have any notes on him? And he also made a good point. In that 3-4 in Wisconsin, that opens up opportunities for the outside linebackers, right? Well, you look at our guy, Leo Chanel, had a huge season 2 years ago, and then Jack Sanborn, same deal, 3 seasons ago, huge, gigantic season. Well, those are great players, but things have to be opened up for him, and that's Keanu Benton in the middle, creating lanes for the outside linebackers to wreak havoc. So Keanu Benton, a very good player in college, and could make a lot of sense here in Kansas City.
Wisconsin's given the NFL some defensive linemen. Just think of the Watt brothers, right? Maybe we don't have to go any further. All right. And this is one that this got your attention too, and another guy that had a much better 2021, and people kind of wondered what happened to him in 2022. And it's Siaka Ika, or Apu Ika if you want to shorten it, but you don't shorten the size of this guy. 6'4", 358 pounds. Now, there's the offensive lineman from Ohio State. Him notwithstanding, Ika could be the biggest guy drafted in the last 10 years in the National Football League draft. He started at LSU. He played on LSU's national championship team. Then he transfers to Baylor. I remember watching him at Baylor in 2021, again, much like the kid at Michigan, just destroying the A-gaps and eating the line. Very highly productive. A comp here is like a Dontari Poe or Danny Shelton was another comp that they gave. So we know about Danny Shelton, right? This is a large human who is very athletic, reminds me of an Ndamukong Suh type too, but the question is what happened to him in 2022? Because he did not equal what he did in 2021, and some of it is like weight management. And so with him, there's a little bit of a buyer's beware of what will happen to him once you get him.
And that's where you lean on your scouting staff, your front office, your coaching staff. Like, that's why all of these meetings are so important. You're trying to figure out why wasn't your year last year as good as it was 2 years ago. And if he ends up being a Chief, that means that Brett Veach and Coach Reed feel comfortable with those answers and thinking they can correct them, because you can't teach 6'3", 335 pounds. I mean, he's a monster of a human, like you said. And for me, I think he'd be a great prototypical nose tackle in this defense. But also, imagine the plays that Coach Reed would draw up. He would definitely touch the ball on offense, wouldn't he?
Hungry Pig might be back.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We were disappointed Colin Saunders didn't get a touchdown last year. This guy's definitely getting a touchdown at some point if he's a Chief.
Oh, yeah, he'll get one. But if he can recapture what he did in 2020, I remember watching his game against K-State live. I mean, he destroyed K-State's front and just that determined the game for Baylor. And then the next year, he just didn't get that done. So there's another one. Can I throw another one in there just for fun before we go to the offensive line?
Let's do it.
Because you and I watch these videos, we kind of do the deep scuba dive in, and then all of a sudden it'll be late at night. You'll text me somebody, and I'll text you and go, hey, have you looked at Carl Brooks of Bowling Green, of the Fighting Falcons of Bowling Green? You don't know about this guy, 6'3", 303. Crazy productivity in his senior year. 18 tackles for losses, 10 sacks, 69 pressures. His Pro Football Focus grade and pass win rate was 93, one of the top in the country. Now here's where, though, the lights started clicking, and let's go back to last week's Defending the Kingdom episode of, remember, looking through the kingdom lens. If you look at Carl Brooks, large human, very athletic human, In 2 years with Bowling Green, 504 snaps over the tackle. So like a 3 technique, right?
Okay.
And then 653 snaps on the edge. Almost a 50-50 ratio where he could play inside and outside. And you think, well, he played at Bowling Green. That's the MAC. He's going to dominate the MAC. Stop it. In his years, he played at UCLA, at Mississippi State, at Tennessee, at Minnesota, and his first career sack was at K-State. He's been good against top-flight competition. Carl Brooks, if you want something sneaky out of Bowling Green.
Yeah, I don't really care for when people say, well, they played in the MAC or they played wherever. I don't care. If you can play, you can play. And you turn the tape on, it's obvious that Carl Brooks can play. And the versatility that you mentioned, again, Steve Spagnuolo would love having a guy like that where, as a rookie, you could deploy him in different spots along the defensive line. He'd make a lot of sense.
Now we see Division II players and FCS players become stars in this league. All right, let's go to the offensive line. And people go, well, wait a minute. The offensive, need some tackles here maybe, right? Orlando Brown Jr. is now a Bengal, and Andrew Wiley has moved on. He's got his next spot. And picking up Juwan Taylor. Now what are you going to do at right tackle? Gosh, Lucas Niang is sitting there. But let's talk about this draft at offensive tackle in specific. Because to me, I think there is a direct correlation to the edge. You've mentioned this many times in doing the scuba dive. There's a lot of edge rushers in this draft. You could get really good value, second, maybe even the third round. With offensive tackle, especially if you're looking for right tackle or guys that can move to guard, there's a bunch of guys in this draft.
Yeah, particularly at 31, I think there's going to be some options. You never know how the board's going to fall. Some teams might fall in love with some guys that we think would be available at 31 and beyond, but I think there's a good shot that if the Chiefs want to add a really good tackle prospect, they're going to be able to do so at 31. So one guy that I wrote down is Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, and one of the better tackle prospects in this draft. He's 6'4", 315 pounds. Both Pro Football Focus and Dane Brugler point out that he has the movement skills of a smaller player, despite immense size, which is great because the trade-off traditionally is if you have a really big player, he's going to struggle on an island and be a little bit slower, but both Brugler and PFF think he has the movement skills to recover quickly despite his big size. He's a very athletic tackle, and he has good length. Only allowed 1 knockdown all year last season. PFF thinks he's an NFL-ready pass protector, which is great news because nobody throws the football more than the Kansas City Chiefs. And here's the big thing for me. If you look at any of these outlets that do these evaluations, they think he projects as either a left or a right tackle in the NFL. A lot of times, even these top tackle prospects, if you look closely, they'll say probably best as a guard or probably a right tackle in the NFL. It's really hard to find left tackle prospects in the NFL. And if you can get a guy like Anton Harrison, maybe he doesn't play left tackle right away, but he can do it if needed. Or down the line, he can play left tackle. That's a serious luxury that it's hard to find, especially at pick number 31 in the draft. So Anton Harrison is a guy that I like a lot.
I like him a lot too, and his athleticism is special, I think. All right, now I dove into your childhood.
Okay.
Right, with the monsters that were the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes.
When you were in your heyday of loving the Chiefs, right, about, 10, 11, 12 years old, and how they wrecked the 2004 season. I can still see that game and that lack of converting. And those two monsters of the Jaguars.
I do remember Ty Law picking off Quinn Gray in, 2005.
Yeah,
though.
big moment. Big moment.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, Quinn Gray.
Ty Law. Chiefs legend.
Now I'm going to jump into your family, especially your grandfather on your maternal side, who lives at Raccoon Mountain, right, in Chattanooga.
Yep.
And what does he love more than anything else other than his family?
Big Orange, baby.
The Tennessee Volunteers. If you look at this draft and the Tennessee Volunteers, people go, gosh, Hendon Hooker, how about the ACL? How's he going to come back? And even more so in the Kingdom, who are they thinking about? Jalen Hyatt, right?
Yep.
Ooh, and he does
for a good reason.
Oh, when you start watching the offensive lineman, I'm going to talk about Darnell Wright, you get caught on Hyatt. You're like, I'm going to back and look at that. No, you're supposed to watch the tackle. But Darnell Wright gets your attention. Okay, 6'3", 333. Love the reach at 33 3/4 inches. Reach is big for the offensive tackle. Here's the other thing. For guards and centers, you want wrestlers. Think Creed Humphrey. At tackles, you want high school basketball players.
Yeah.
So Darnell Wright is very athletic, and he kind of went back and forth. This goes to what you just mentioned about Harrison, but 27 starts at right tackle, Then he had a couple at right guard, played 13 at left tackle, moved him back to right tackle, and kept him there. Here's a couple things that jumped off the video at me about Darnell Wright. First of all, if he came to the Chiefs, he could be an immediate swing tackle. There's your third tackle. And think of the role Andrew Wiley had most of the time in his career. All right, that's his start. And then he could morph into possibly being a starter. Or your tackle over tackle if you go big. All right, here's the things that caught my attention. They played a lot of tempo offense at Tennessee. A lot.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning no huddle. You're up and running, baby. Well, that doesn't translate to the NFL until the 2-minute offense. You get into the 4-minute or 2-minute offense, and so many offensive linemen cannot hack it, particularly early in their career, when you get into the 2-minute offense. And you're playing these elite rushers like the Bosas, but you're now going without a huddle. He did an excellent job in Tennessee's tempo offense. The other thing is they moved him a lot. They would move him from right tackle on a snap and pull him all the way out to the left side, outside the left tackle. That was impressive. They did it a lot. And then the third thing was probably why he'll move up the board. One game can do it, and it was his game against Will Anderson Jr. of Alabama. One pressure by the guy who might be, just might be, the top pick in this draft.
That was Tennessee's forever Super Bowl, that game. I mean, it was, they scored 50 points and won in the game-winning field goal.
50 to 49 or something.
And all of their guys stepped up.
Did your grandpa like that game?
I think he did, yeah. And Jalen Hyatt had 4 touchdowns.
So awesome.
Something crazy.
So good.
Everyone wearing an orange uniform had a huge game against Alabama, and they'll be remembered forever at Neyland Stadium for it. But, yeah, Darnell Wright's a heck of a player. I really like how he responded going back to right tackle.
Yeah.
So some guys might see that as a demotion or might get down on themselves because he struggled a bit at left tackle, but went back to right tackle and was maybe the best right tackle in all of college football. So it says a lot about him as a player.
And again, he could be a guy that you don't have to rush him in and be the first day one starter, but he could be a really good swing tackle and an opportunity here for the Chiefs. All right, let's go to your next offensive tackle.
So I've got DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. If you want a absolute
large human,
mountain of a human, he's 6'8", 374 pounds. So for some context
and if
here,
Ika's not the heaviest guy drafted in 10 years, this guy will be.
Yeah. So
oh my gosh,
if you ever saw Orlando Brown Jr. in person, he was a big guy. Well, DeJuan Jones is 34 pounds heavier than Orlando Brown. Doesn't make any sense. He's just gigantic, and he has a 7'6" wingspan. It broke the Senior Bowl record. He's just an absolute mammoth human being, insane size and length, and also really good at football. He didn't allow a single sack or hit last season for Ohio State. His 1.3% pressure rate allowed led all tackles. Now, when you're that big, it's hard to move.
Yeah. And
him out on an island, his recovery speed, those are all kind of knocks against him. People do say that for his size, he's actually pretty good at it. But it's just a reality. If you're 6'8", 374 pounds, you may struggle against the occasional speed rusher. Just, it's physics. But DeJuan Jones is going to make it in the NFL with this size. Is he a better fit for a run-first, smash-mouth kind of team like the Ravens? Probably. But when you have that kind of size, especially if you're putting in that right tackle, I think it could work for the Chiefs because it's hard to get around 6'8", 374 pounds with a 7'6" wingspan. So DeJuan Jones is a name to know, just a mountain of a human being.
When you watch his video, you're going Ravens right tackle.
That's what he
just
is.
what it looks like, right?
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Like the 10 guys they've had that.
And he'll dominate in that role for sure.
He will.
Yeah,
he'll fit. Another guy that you had your eye on a while ago, but I'll go with Matthew Bergeron, 6'5", 322 pounds out of Syracuse. Why is he fun? Because we remember Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. Remember the Canadian doctor, and fans would go, why you call him the Canadian doctor? Because he's a Canadian doctor. Okay, and he won a Super Bowl for the Chiefs at right guard. Bergeron is not a right guard. He's a left tackle. But he's Canadian. Not sure he's a doctor or not, but he's a Canadian, and he's been a 4-year starter, captain at Syracuse. Here's what's interesting. There are only 37 players last year in college football from Canada that played at Power 5 schools, and only 5 of those came from Quebec.
Wow.
So most of them think Ontario, Toronto, right? Not far from Buffalo. But Quebec has not pumped out a bunch of French-Canadian NFL players. Here's your next one. Bergeron is very good. If you look at his run blocking, he's been awesome for Syracuse. It's the pass blocking that he struggled against. And people would say, if you want to look at the NFL-ready guys, you look at the SEC, especially the SEC West.
Yeah.
ACC this year, think about who he went up against. Miles Murphy of Clemson, first-round pick. Isaiah Foskey of Notre Dame, if not a first-round, early second-round pick. I mean, he went up against some elite rushers this year.
Keanu White probably at Georgia Tech.
Same thing, which I know you love him, the old tight end out of Old Dominion. But Matthew Bergeron is a guy that – is he a left tackle? Probably, because a lot of these guys you want to move to right tackle. Or I was going to throw in a third guy here, Peter Skoronski, who's thought to be the number one tackle in this draft.
Yeah.
To me, he's Joe Thuney. I think he was Joe Thuney. He was great at Northwestern on a 111 team, beat Nebraska in the opening game in Ireland, and that was it. He played on a terrible offense, but he was this great player at tackle. But he looks like Joe Thuney. So there's a lot of guys you move to guard, like Skoronski. A lot of guys you move maybe aren't left tackle or right tackle. To me, Bergeron is not someone you would move. He's going to have to grow into it. He's not a day one left tackle, but he looks like a left tackle to me.
What you said about Skoronski is kind of what I was getting at the beginning of the show, or I guess the beginning of when we were talking about offensive tackles. So many of these guys, no matter how good they are, it's so hard to play tackle in the NFL that even if they're one of the best tackles in the nation, they might be a guard at the next level. And that's the hard reality when you're looking for tackles in the draft. It's just hard to find them. Now, Bergeron, I think, could be a good player in the NFL. Is he a first rounder? Probably not. He's probably day 2, maybe day 3. But the Chiefs need a French-Canadian on the team. It's been years now, so he would make a lot of sense.
We need somebody from French Quebec back on this team for sure. I love it. And, yes, he's got to show some consistency, but he was the first freshman to start at tackle for Syracuse in 20 years, and he was a 4-year starter.
He's a great story. I mean, I was reading Dane Brugler's write-up on him. He loved hockey like any Canadian does. Basketball was his first love. But all of a sudden, he's gigantic, and they're like, you got to play football. You just got to do it. And he's like, all right. And then turns out he's going to end up in the NFL. Not bad.
Can I throw one more in?
Of course.
Just because this year we're not going to have the time because we're hosting the draft for me to do a feature that we've done in the past. I begged Glenn Conley, right? I begged him to, can I do the Why Do I Love This Guy So Much feature, right?
Did he
Think
say
about
no?
the years. Yeah, he said no. We got too much to do.
Wow.
So
tough.
That's the way it is, man. And when you're down the totem pole. So anyway. Cody Mock of North Dakota State.
Yes, he's the ultimate Mitch prospect.
He's why do I love this guy so much? He lost his 2 front teeth in junior high basketball and never replaced them. You can actually get teeth put in there, right? Cody says no. He's from a little town in North Dakota of 900 people. He played 9-man football. And some think he's going to be a first-round pick, probably second round, probably a guard. He played left tackle for North Dakota State. We know how legendary that program is. But Cody Mock, high honorable mention to you, buddy. Missing your 2 front teeth. He's got big red hair, like just crazy, like, you know.
Mane.
It's just a mane, yeah. I mean, he's just got this. And Coach Reed would love him. Like, if Coach Reed calls you a redhead, it's one of the greatest compliments he can give you. Cody Mock, man, you put that red and gold uniform on him with no teeth. And I mean, this dude played 9-man football, 900 people in his town, probably about 10 people in his graduating class. I'm going to give a shout-out to Cody Mock.
And he's someone else who's probably a guard in the NFL. But, I mean, the Chiefs, their interior offensive line is the best in the NFL, in my opinion. Like, if there's one position group that I don't think the Chiefs are going to add, it's probably interior offensive line. But you never know. The value's there on a guy like Cody Mock. Could be a very good swing guard who can also play some tackle at the next level.
Plus, Coach Reed may just look at that guy and go, hey, we're going to take him.
We need him.
Yeah, we need
him.
Okay, well, there you go. You have to get it done in the trenches to win in the National Football League, especially in the playoffs, but at any time. But, Matt, it's just so exciting now as we get closer to the draft, and the draft being in Kansas City, once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Yeah, it's really going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And what I'm so excited for, and this is the absolute nerd in me, it's you and I sitting in the conference room just writing out our little board and crossing names off, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and we're like, so-and-so is still available. And then once the first round's over, looking at day 2, the draft is so much fun. And just
Are we going to have a GoPro in there for that?
I think we should. Yeah, that's
should.
a good idea.
Yeah, as long as we edit it.
Yeah, just seeing how it all plays out, right?
Yeah.
Seeing the strategy, seeing how teams are maneuvering. And the good news for Chiefs fans is you're Super Bowl champions, all right? There's so many teams trying to find their quarterback in this draft. Is Bryce Young the guy? Is Will Levis the guy? Is Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, are they the guy? Are they going to be our savior? The Chiefs have their guy. The Chiefs have a 2-time Super Bowl MVP, a 2-time NFL MVP in the last 4 years, and they have a guy who's going to lead this team hopefully to many more championships. This roster is championship caliber, and it's all about just getting a little bit better. And this is the perfect kind of draft if you're a Chiefs fan. See all the drama and everything play out, then let's get a good player at 31.
We'll close this way. We will give you our public service announcement. Make sure you call before you dig, right? You don't want to hit a power line. But I'm telling you also, if you want to win your fantasy league, take a wide receiver. If you want to have parades, you better draft well in the trenches.
10, 5, touchdown! Lock it down! And the celebration begins at Arrowhead.